My name is Meredith Childress, and I looked at the story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. My focus when researching this literary piece was the author's intent when writing it and how it was actually perceived. To look at this, first I had to look at the time period in which it was written. The story was first published in January 1892 in a magazine and was quickly considered to be an important work of American feminist literature because of Charlotte Perkins' attitude in the story towards mental and physical health of women in the 19th century. During this time, physicians saw all women as susceptible to mental problems and ill health and breakdowns. This was due to their biological weakness and reproductive cycles. Women who were creative and ambitious were often deemed even more at risk. In order for women to not be able to compete with men who were in power often persuaded others to believe that women who had these aspirations, it was simply just because they had mental health issues. Charlotte Perkins Gilman was diagnosed with nervous exhaustion, which is now found to often be related to postpartum depression or a really traumatic childbirth in which the child might not survive or it was just traumatic for other reasons. This was shown when Charlotte Perkins Gilman discusses the room that she was in. She says, "It is a big, airy room, the whole floor nearly, with windows that look all ways and air and sunshine galore. It was nursery first, then a playground and gymnasium, I should judge, and the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls." The room that Charlotte Perkins Gilman isolated herself in and spent the majority of her time in was the nursery of her deceased child. She goes on to describe the nursery as atrocious, which supports the idea of this postpartum depression. When she refers to the nursery as atrocious, it leads the reader to believe that there is some sort of resentment there, which is often found in postpartum depression cases. In today's medicines, there are many ways, like therapies and treatments and medication, that could have really severely helped Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and if it was in the time period that she was in, or if this had happened now. Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote this piece as a diary excerpt, and it really expressed her innermost thoughts. And these thoughts might not have been expressed to her husband, who was the physician taking care of her, or the lack thereof, really. But the reader was able to see exactly how she was feeling through all of this. Her thoughts were really not that of a crazy person, but rather someone who was just continuously misunderstood and undermined. She mentions a lot how she knew she was suffering and how these thoughts were really, really horrible and depressing and just like defeating to her. But when someone who has a medical background and, seems to know what he's talking about, she was really brainwashed after being told over and over again that nothing was wrong with her, and wasn't able to seek more treatment than that. So her only solace was really writing all her thoughts down into her diary and just getting it out there and telling her story from a really personal manner, which is what we see in the literary piece. So an example of this is you can tell when she says things like, "John is away all day and even some nights when his cases are serious. I'm glad my case is not serious." Is more of that brainwashing that nothing's really wrong with her and that she's going to be okay and it's all in her head and everything like that. So this quote could really go one of two ways. It could either represent the brainwashing and the constant reassurance that nothing is wrong and that she just genuinely actually believes that to a degree, or it could be representing some frustration with her husband that he's really not taking her mental health seriously. It's more than likely the first one of these, and she's just confused on what she's feeling and what she's being told, because she goes on to say that, but these nervous troubles are dreadfully depressing. And to me, the use of dreadful and depressing back to back like that just really reiterates and emphasizes how painful her condition really is for her. A lot of times people going through these women and men, can't really express the extent of which they are feeling these problems. And especially when the person they're trying to express that to doesn't believe them, doesn't take it seriously, everything like that, and maybe has some experience in the same kind of stuff. So, in my opinion, Charlotte Perkins Gilman was really able to successfully portray her message in the Yellow Wallpaper. She was not someone who was unable to be fixed or just making something up to suffer about. She really had undergone a trauma, and she was able to portray sanity in her writing, in my opinion. You know, she didn't sound like these crazy thoughts, all gibberish and unorganized and horrible thoughts. She sounded like someone who was suffering and who really just needed help. And maybe that could be an argument for her husband, why maybe he just believed she needed time and needed to go through this on her own. But with that same thing being said, there was obvious oppression when her husband and her brother, both male doctors, just immediately disregarded it because she was a female and told her that what she was feeling wasn't true, and that it just, their knowledge and their background gave them the executive decision on that. And with her loved ones being able to tell her that, it really just made it worse, and made it where she couldn't seek any of the help that she really needed. And she really was able, through this and getting her story out and having people see that she really wasn't as crazy as people might have originally perceived or knew her as then, and how it, in that time period, and maybe that was the case with a lot of women in that time period. So she really did make large advances in feminist movements by showing that, you know, like maybe these women were actually going through something and weren't having mental breakdowns and crazy things because of mental cycles.